Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. I've lived in my little suburban neighborhood for over 15 years now. It's a nice, quiet area with mostly families and retirees as neighbors. Everyone tends to keep to themselves, but still waves and chats if we run into each other on the street. It's the kind of friendly, low-drama place I was hoping to find when I moved out of the big city. There's a walking trail that goes through the woods behind my house, and I like to take my two dogs, Max and Buddy, back there for some exercise every day. Max is a mutt I adopted from the shelter when he was just a puppy. Buddy I found wandering around my backyard one day, no collar or tags. I put up flyers, but no one ever claimed him, so he became part of the family too. My dogs are the sweetest, friendliest pups you could imagine. They get excited and bark when someone comes to the door or they see another dog being walked. But I've trained them not to jump on people. I make sure to keep them on leashes anytime we're not in the backyard so they don't bother anyone. Like I said, it's a quiet neighborhood and I want to be respectful. About 2 months ago, I noticed a moving truck at the house across the street that had been for sale. I didn't think much of it, just figured someone had finally bought the place. The next day, I was out mowing my lawn when I saw a woman come outside with two young kids. I waved and yelled hello, introducing myself. She gave me kind of a fake smile and a little wave back, but didn't come over to chat. No big deal, I thought. Maybe she's just busy getting settled in. The first red flag came a few days later when I was out walking Max and Buddy. We were coming up the street toward my house as the woman was loading her kids into her SUV. My dogs paused to sniff at a tree and must have caught the kids' attention because they suddenly started barking. Just a couple woofs, nothing crazy. But the woman immediately snapped at the kids to get in the car and shot me a nasty glare. I apologized and explained that the dogs were just saying hi. I assured her they were friendly and didn't bite. She just rolled her eyes dramatically and drove off without a word. Okay, I thought, someone's in a bad mood. Surely she'll lighten up once she's more settled. But unfortunately that wasn't the case. Every time I saw her after that, she had the same sour, unfriendly look on her face. My friendly waves went ignored. I even went over and introduced myself again, hoping to get off on a better foot. I told her if she ever needed someone to watch the kids, I'd be happy to help out since I work from home. She smiled politely, but in a cold, insincere way, and said she'd keep that in mind. She never did take me up on the offer. In fact, she started letting her kids play in the front yard almost as if she was taunting me. Of course, my dogs would bark when they saw the kids running around, and every time this woman would glare and shake her head in annoyance. One day I was coming back from the walking trail when I heard yelling. As I got closer, I realized it was coming from the woman's yard. I looked over to see her screaming at my dogs to shut up. Max and Buddy were in my front yard looking out at the kids playing across the street. As usual, just a couple barks. Nothing crazy. Before I could call them back over or apologize, the woman stormed across the street and into my yard. She started smacking my dogs on their backs and haunches, hard smacks with an open palm. Buddy yelped and they both ran behind me, tails tucked between their legs. I was shocked. I immediately told her not to hit my dogs and to get off my property. She shot back that I needed to control them because her kids shouldn't have to put up with nuisance barking. I pointed out her kids were playing right where my dogs could see them from my own yard. She claimed the barking was excessive and scaring her kids. I told her 2 barks was not excessive and I've been working on training them. She just rolled her eyes again and walked away. At that point, I'd had enough of her nasty attitude and lack of manners. As soon as she went back inside, I marched over and knocked on her door. When she answered, I told her that she had no right to put her hands on my dogs. I said I was happy to continue working with them on not barking, but that giving them a few smacks was not okay. Before I could get another word out, she said she was calling the police to report that I was threatening her and her family. I told her I absolutely was not threatening her in any way, shape, or form. I just wanted to talk reasonably about this issue. But she slammed the door in my face. I waited calmly in my yard for the police to arrive. When the officer showed up, the woman started fake crying and claiming I had come to her house and yelled at her. She said I told her if she ever touched my dogs again, I would come after her. Complete BS. I explained calmly to the police officer exactly what had happened. The dogs barked a couple times, she hit them, I came to speak rationally with her, and she falsely accused me of threatening her. Thankfully, the cop seemed to recognize she was likely exaggerating, but unfortunately he still had to file a report about it. He recommended we both just avoid each other as much as possible and keep the dogs from barking at her kids. Easier said than done with her letting them play right in view. Over the next couple weeks, I did my best to limit the dog's barking and exposure to the kids. I kept them in the backyard most of the time, but couldn't stop them from catching a glimpse and letting out an occasional woof when bringing them inside. And every time, the woman would shoot me a nasty look or shout over for me to get those dogs under control. Then last weekend, I was up in my bedroom when I heard yelling and the dogs frantically barking. I looked out the window just in time to see the woman storm into my yard and spray my dogs in the face with a hose. Buddy was shaking his head and rubbing at his eyes with his paws, and Sweet Max just sat there looking sad and confused about why he was being punished. This time I didn't hesitate. I immediately called the police to report an intruder assaulting my animals. By the time the cops showed up, the woman was back in her house. But I showed them the video footage I had from my security camera proving what she did. The police went and talked to her, but again she tried to say my dogs were out of control and she was just trying to discipline them with a little water. Thankfully, the video footage proved her claim was bogus. The officer said he would be filing a report about the incident and advised that I look into getting a restraining order against this woman since things were escalating. He also said to take my dogs to the vet just to be sure they didn't suffer any injury or trauma from what she did. I'm just sick over the fact that this woman felt entitled to abuse my poor pups who never actually did anything wrong. All they did was a few excited barks at kids playing in their sightline. They certainly didn't deserve to be hit or sprayed in the face. I used to think pretty much everyone in the neighborhood was kind and respectful. Now I'll definitely be more cautious trusting strangers, especially ones who seem cold right off the bat. And you better believe I'll be getting that restraining order ASAP so this woman can never lay a finger on my dogs again. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Let me start by saying, never purchase a house in an homeowner association. It is a complete mess that should be regulated and illegal. If I knew about homeowner associations when I bought my first home, I would have never purchased my first home in one. My wife and I purchased our first home when we were 24 and 25. We spent months looking at houses and areas, trying to find a forever home in a good district for potential future kids, etc. We finally found a perfect one at a decent price. At first, everything was great, a super nice neighborhood and decent neighbors. However, a few months after buying the house, we rented an RV to go on a trip, and parked it in the driveway for the 3 days leading up to the trip, to pack it and for me to learn how half the things in it worked. Well, this is when we learned that homeowner associations are absolutely crazy, and our neighbor was on the board of our local homeowner association. Within an hour of it being parked, he got home and stormed over, demanding we remove it from his neighborhood, or he would have it towed and fine us for every hour it was there. Myself, being the average and normal person, told him kindly to get out of my driveway, and if he returns, I'll call the cops, because he was screaming like a madman inches from my face. About 3 hours later, a big rig tow truck showed up, and he walked up like he was a god, handing me a plain envelope with a letter inside that pretty much said, "By order of the Homeowner Association, this RV is to be towed, and a fine of $1,500 for violating their rules." While Mr. Crazy Board member might not listen to reason, the tow truck guy they found wasn't so fond of entering my driveway and towing a vehicle when I told him if he comes on the property, I'll call the cops. Once the tow truck driver decided he's done being involved in this mess and left, the neighbor went even more crazy and stormed off. I called my friend to get his dad's number because he's an attorney, to ask him about this insane letter and fine I just received, and to ask him for some legal advice. After speaking to his father, he told me to come down, write him a $500 check, and bring along all the papers I received when purchasing the home and the current letter I just received. The next day, he had a very friendly letter sent to my neighbor and the homeowner association board, basically telling my neighbor to leave us and our property alone. I then continued to receive fines of $1,500 a day in plain envelopes, not postmarked, stuffed into my mailbox, which I then turned over to my friend's father, and each time he sent another set of letters and contacted USPS to report the incidents. Turns out putting mail into people's mailbox is a crime, who knew? Well, we decided to go on our week-long trip across the state and mildly forget about it all. Kind of upset I had to spend $500 to have an attorney send letters, but that's what they do. Fast forward to us returning from the trip and the RV back in our driveway for 2 days, so we can unload and clean, then return it. Again, each day more envelopes stuffed into our mailbox and more visits to our attorney, more letters sent, and more incidents reported to USPS. Well, here's where the fun really begins. Turns out Mr. Crazy finally gives me a summons to appear before the board. My attorney said this is crazy illegal because what they've done is use what looks like an actual legal document improperly to summon me to the board. Another $500 to the attorney, and we wait for the date they made, a Tuesday at 10 a.m. They attempt to keep my attorney out of the room on some board privacy rule, but quickly shut up when he begins going over their own rules that they are violating to them. Deep in this homeowner association book are some very nicely worded rules and stuff outlining what makes board members ineligible and how they cannot serve if they commit certain infractions. Well, guess what? Mr. Crazy Neighbor has committed several of them, all documented. Also, the cherry on top is that if 51% of the homeowner association members vote to dissolve the homeowner association, it all goes away. Well, it happens. My wife worked part-time from home during this mess and had all the free time in the world to begin a disband the homeowner association campaign. Over the course of the next 2 months, she went around and really began to get to know our neighborhood. Turns out a lot of people dislike the homeowner association and the power-hungry seniors who act like dictators that run it. The homeowner association attempted to stall everything by holding no meetings, another homeowner association violation, and began their own campaign trying to change homeowner association rules to keep from being ousted, and a fairly racist flyer and letter to everyone explaining the dangers of not having an homeowner association and all the bad people that will move in and take over, sell drugs, etc. That our houses would become much less valuable and everything else they could try. Turns out it's extremely fun to use someone's own rules against them. The neighborhood even started a fund that paid us back what it cost us to get the attorney started and the continued costs he had. A few weeks after their failed fear campaign and being forced to hold a meeting, a vote was called by using their own rules. The homeowner association was no more, and all remaining funds were to be dispersed back to the homeowners and members equally. This never happened. Turns out somehow the homeowner association used all their funds in the course of the last 2 months. About half the former board members sold their homes and moved, including Mr. Crazy Neighbor. I've spent 3 hours trying to find old news articles because it was reported on, mostly due to the racist letters by the homeowner association. But it was too long ago to find anything. Moral of the whole mess: don't buy a home in a homeowner association, and if you do, plan to hire an attorney. The next one is a petty revenge story. I, 29F, don't have any kids, but I have my younger sister, 16, living with me for around 10 years, and we have a trampoline in our back garden from when she was younger. The neighbor to the left of me has 4 kids and moved in a year ago. 2 weeks ago, Glasgow started getting really good weather, so the kids have been out playing constantly. Not an issue. They asked if I could let the kids use the trampoline one day, so I was like, sure, but only for a bit because I have friends coming over for some drinks. 7 p.m. comes. I ask them to go home because my 5 friends have shown up and we're going to be drinking. Cue the crying, they leave the garden upset, but hey, that's not my issue. They've been on it for 3 hours at this point. Their mom pops her head out of her bedroom window and asks if they can stay in the garden longer. No, I'm not your babysitter. She's annoyed but drops it. Last week I came home from some shopping and, to my surprise, found all 4 of the kids in the garden, plus their younger cousin. I ask them to leave. Tell them they can't just come into my garden without me there. And they didn't even ask. They refuse to leave, so I shout up at their mom and tell her to get them out of the garden. She says, "Let them play for a bit, you don't even use it." Okay, but still, not your garden? Eventually we get into an argument and they leave. She's pissed off and shouting, saying I'm being a Karen and I should let them in. I tell her not to ask again because the answer will be no. This happened again the day after. All 4 kids plus their cousin waiting till I move the car from the drive and heading straight into the garden. So I wake up this morning. I've since put a lock on the trampoline, just a small one on the mesh safety enclosure to stop them from opening it up, because I'm petty AF. Plus, it's Saturday. I'm not working today. My day off, and I want a long lie. But no, the neighbor decides that at 9 a.m. this morning, her kids are being fired straight out of that house with breakfast bars and a bottle of water, and they head straight into the garden. So I can hear them from my window. I look out and tell them to leave. By the time I get downstairs, the mom has descended from her house and is trying to climb the fence between our gardens, shouting about how I used to let them use it, and she's going to call the police for hitting her kids. Great, you do that. I'll be sure to show them the ring camera footage, which coincidentally also has footage of your husband picking the lock open so your brats can use the trampoline. So long story short, an entitled mother sends her kids into my garden repeatedly, even after being told not to. She calls the police on me for harassment and hitting her kids and ends up getting her own husband arrested for theft, housebreaking, and criminal damage. Suck it, idiot. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This is a story from recent times when the big thing was to use external libraries and drag them into the systems as building blocks, Lego style. There were multiple project teams doing this. Not reinventing the wheel, we will just include this library and use that code. I had a weird job, half operations QA and half security. Pulling in random libraries that we didn't have context understanding of could be security issues. Lots turned out to be performance issues, since one small function could, and did, drag in megabytes of code we didn't need. The lead architect on one of these projects was wider than tall, and had a custom-made rolling chair that looked like something that Blanche DuBois would have flung herself across having the vapors, or Jabba the Hutt in an American IT cube farm, pick your genre. In any case, they were adamant about pulling libraries from repositories, and if the developer of the repository was pulling in extra stuff, there must be a reason. And that external servers gave us higher reliability since the risk was spread across many servers, missing the complexity part. No architecture changes, get out of my tent. So as time went on, production code got slower and bigger. I got a small team together to pull down the libraries, comb out the parts we were not using, test on a load-balanced pair of internal servers, and then stand them up on some Amazon cloud servers, AWS servers. Push back the new AWS links to the dev teams. They were happy because when the new code went in, they got credited with increased performance. Lather, rinse, and repeat. And we had moved 99% of the library to our AWS system, cloned from our internal servers, and had reduced the footprint by about 70%. Performance was up, and we were able to audit the code in the library to make sure that it wasn't leaking data to other places. We had found a few cases where performance data was being sent, but our firewalls blocked it. Our internal TCOM, network control team, noted it, and we pulled the performance monitor code that was sending data to a third network server we didn't know. So all was right with the world. I had the library we needed, small, secure, and understood. The last step for me was to pull it in-house so it was on our servers. This would reduce the latency calls to go get it, reduce network needs to the outside, I could close some firewall holes, and I could save the money from the AWS server. Knowing that this would come down to a masterful PowerPoint, I got a friend in marketing to help. We dotted T's, crossed I's, spell-checked, and were ready to go. We are set up in the lead management conference room. Front and center is the big 92 inches monitor for presentations. On the border are 6 monitors, 3 on each side, that show the current status of things. The top left is external networks. Next is internal networks. Bottom is firewall issues, bounced packets, advanced persistent threats, etc. On the right was our SAP environment. Next was Salesforce and Workday. Bottom was key internal systems, the one we were talking about in that window with others. I start my dog and pony show, and halfway, Architect Hutt chimes in and says, "No, this is not what I architected. We need to go back to the pure, authentic libraries, and they need to be on external servers." Okay, but what happens if the external servers crash? They never crash. I give a slight nod to my 2IC, a few subtle clicks, and you can see the network link to the server library goes from green to yellow to red, soon followed by the app going red. My phone rings, kilted here. Oh, AWS has fallen down? Spin up the West Coast. AWS has server farms all over. We are on the East Coast locations. Needed to manually move to West Coast since Architect didn't set failover up. Oh, that will take 20 mins. At this point, SAP now has red sections. Okay, and when that's done, we need to redeploy the app to pick up the new instances. Salesforce now showing yellow. How long to redeploy? Okay, less than an hour? And now for some reason, Workday is also showing yellow. Super, so we should be back in 55 minutes? Cool, call me when we are back. I blurb through the slide sets, with people having one eye on my data, one eye on the ever-red dashboard, well except data links to AWS, which went green with the reduced load, and a third eye on the architect having a fainting spell that would have made Blanche proud. 45 mins in, people are panicked, and I got asked how long to use my in-house library. About 60 seconds, we can reroute all the packets to AWS to these load balance servers and they should take over. No, screams the architect, flailing around on their wheeled love seat. That violates all of our programming paradigms. Senior VP responds, yay, but we are back to making money again. Kilted cut us over. My 2IC with the chat window open to network control gives the go signal. We watch some internal network traffic switch, AWS traffic stop, Salesforce goes yellow, then green, and finally Workday smiles with green also. System load monitors show a drop since they are not pulling in all the extra cruft. I got approval. Jabba never spoke to me again, but his team did respond to our emails about the internal library and how to get things added. Coda, what does this have to do with the guy that wrote code and wants to know how to protect it? Turns out Jabba's move was to move all these libraries to a central space and then sell a service and charge a fat fee to keep the libraries current. If the service got cut off, the systems would stop working, so that was the leverage. Because I was 4 steps ahead, the plan failed. We were all buttoned up in-house with code we had audited, but other companies may not be watching. 2IC is my second in charge, kind of like the bastard operator from Hell Assistant. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.